So there's a particular stock I'm really looking at buying today, actually. And right before I do that, I want to give you some reasons why, just to help you understand kind of the way I'm looking at this. And also, it might even help you with maybe your own stock research. Obviously, I'm not giving you any financial advice in this video. I'm just kind of showing you some examples of what I'm doing. But in this video, I'm going to talk about T-Mobile stock, why I believe in buying T-Mobile stock right now, which is up 0.95% today, down 0.33% after hours. It's going into the weekend. I'd say that's fairly common. But we're up right now for this particular account, which is mostly focused on buying individual stocks, trying to boost growth long term. This is mostly a buy and hold account that I'm using, and I'm using this as kind of an account where I am working on buying individual stocks, trying to beat the S&P 500. Because if you can't beat the S&P 500, what's the point in actually buying individual stocks? You're just wasting your time. So this is the growth account. This is for long term that I'm using, and for this one, I'm not really doing indexes, ETFs, or anything like that. So we're up about 30% right now, year to date, which is pretty solid. Would I like it to be more? Sure. But we're buying stock pretty much every month. So every time you buy stock, unless it makes a big jump instantly, a lot of times it shows that number is less than what it really would be if you looked at the growth of each individual stock. But we're just going to use that number right there for this example. And if you look at the S&P 500, it's up about 21% year to date. So far we're beating the S&P 500 this year by almost 10%, which is pretty solid considering all the things that have happened. We've had some pretty major dips, especially in the AI stocks that have had the most growth, but also a lot of fluctuation, especially in the last 3 months or so. But what we're looking at here is T-Mobile. I believe in T-Mobile right now. You might be wondering why T-Mobile of all things when all the rage is in other areas like AI. Well, you need to diversify, or I can't tell you what to do, but I need to diversify and not have too much in AI. I think one mistake I made, even though we're up beating the S&P 500 right now, I think one mistake I made, as you can see in the last few months, is a little bit too much fluctuation because of these high growth AI stocks, because a lot of them go down and up at the same time. If you're talking about just chip companies, for instance, if you're talking about NVIDIA, which is the obvious one, you're also talking about Qualcomm, you're talking about AMD. A lot of times those stocks like that, they go down and they go up at the same time. So it's good, from what I've learned, to obviously have diversification in stock, but also diversification in different classes of stocks. So I'm actually looking into telecom with this one, with T-Mobile. There's a few reasons I specifically picked T-Mobile. I believe that they have good ratings from their employees, their CEO. If you look at the culture here, I believe it's pretty solid. 3.7 out of 5 stars for people recommending working here, I would say, is a pretty solid score from all the different companies I've looked at. I've covered many different companies on other channels before, covering different job companies. But if you look at best places to work, they've been nominated many different times. I do believe in a company having a good work culture and taking care of their employees. 65% also recommend the CEO here as well. You just want a good, well-run company, in my opinion, not just a company that's innovative, that's doing something that sounds good for the future. So T-Mobile obviously been around a long time. Actually, I believe they merged with Sprint. So they are like one of the big three telecom companies if you think of AT&T and Verizon. So as far as how T-Mobile has actually been doing, if you look at year to date, they are up. If you look at year to date, they're actually up 26.72%. If you look at the past year, they're up 46.87%. And the past 5 years, almost 165%. You don't see a lot of dips in T-Mobile over the last 5 years. They've been very steady. If you look at their financials, I think they look pretty solid. You know, we're green all the way across the board here. Another thing that's interesting about them, they have a 25.45 price to earnings ratio, which is a good sign of, If you want to use the PE ratio, it's a good sign of whether or not you are overpaying for a stock. A lot of people use this. If you've ever watched somebody predict stocks before, they also have almost a 1% dividend yield. There's also talk that could be going up very soon. If you compare that to the PE ratio of VOO, which is essentially exactly the same as the S&P 500, it's actually lower than the price to earnings ratio of the S&P 500, which is a good sign in my opinion that, some people go by a particular score of like 20 or less. That is what some people do. I like to look at, well, what is it relative to the S&P 500 right now? And I like to use the Vanguard S&P 500 just as a general estimate of like where we're at in terms of the PE ratio here. So T-Mobile has launched a really good 5G internet program that is actually allowing you to take your Wi-Fi with you. Obviously, I think it's a little bit better than a typical hotspot is. If you think of a hotspot, it's great maybe temporarily, but if you look at T-Mobile's new 5G internet plans, it's basically like having stronger Wi-Fi that you can take with you. Obviously, it depends on where you are. Another thing that they're doing, they have a partnership with SpaceX, which will be a direct-to-cell service with T-Mobile that they've started here. So I think that could end up being very lucrative later on. They're also raising the price target to $232 from $200 at RBC Capital. They also mentioned, like I said, that the upcoming dividend will be larger than last year's. So just all the signs point to this being a stock that's on the rise, a company that's doing great things. They're innovating, and they are very bullish on the numbers they are seeing internally as well. And if you look at the analyst ratings, let's say you don't care about my opinion at all. You want to look at the average analyst ratings based on 30 analysts on Robinhood. They have an 80% buy score right now with literally 13% hold and only 6.7% saying you should sell. And because, like I said, we've had some of the top tier companies that have been the ones that have grown the most in my portfolio over the past year. We're talking companies like Meta and Nvidia and also some other AI related stocks. I believe it's good for me in my position and maybe even in some others. I believe it's good for me in my position and maybe even in other positions to actually diversify away from just being all in on AI. I do believe AI is the future, and I do believe AI should be a big part of my portfolio going forward. But I just don't see that going away. But also it can be very up and down at times if there is some sort of new government policy that's passed or anything that could affect AI, maybe even what's going on in Taiwan with their chip manufacturing could make a big difference on your AI stock. So I think it is good to actually diversify a little bit into other areas. I haven't seen a lot of stocks I'm really that interested in for the telecom area, but I do believe T-Mobile is really doing well and are on the right track to keep growing in the future.